All right, Jay, well, I'm going to let Karen introduce her because they've been high school friends and everything, so she knows much more. Thank you.
This is Sandy Posh. She's my best friend in high school, so we have lots of good memories. About 7 years. But I don't know what to say, so I'm going to let you take it away.
Yes, so I basically grew up at Karen's, her house, her farm, and was really close to the family. And yeah, they've just always kind of been my second family. So when I was away, I just asked family and friends to pray for me as the Lord just took me on a great adventure this past fall. And so that's why I'm here, is to share about my journey and my trip, and share a little bit about what the Lord has been doing in my life. And so yeah, so I mean, how does a small town girl get to go to multiple countries and go out and do mission work and stuff? Like, it's nothing that was on my radar, by all means. It was never a passion of mine when I was young to go do mission work anywhere. I grew up, went to school. I was a social worker by trade, did social work for about 18 years. Was a licensed mental health therapist, did kind of the whole gamut of things, got my master's, and yeah, worked from all the way from kids and child protection all the way up to the elderly, worked in a nursing home, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. And always knew the Lord, grew up knowing the Lord, but I wouldn't say as a young person living at home that I had a personal relationship with the Lord. Not anywhere close to what I have today. But I had a good foundation growing up, and in my 20s I began to pursue that. When I moved away, I met a coworker of mine. Her dad was a Baptist preacher, and she was one of the first people to kind of teach me what it was like to really have a personal relationship with the Lord. And so I began kind of learning more about Jesus and who he was and the kind of life he wants to have with me, and just began pressing in and actually reading the Bible for the first time and just pursuing him. And so 20s kind of came and went, and 30s I really began working a lot on myself, because as a social worker and therapist, I decided I can only take people as far as I've gone. And so if I'm not willing to work on my own stuff, how can I help anybody else through theirs? And so I really spent time doing that, kind of having the Lord help me through a lot of different things. And then as I broached into my 40s, I guess, I was working at the VA, and had just left the social work job and started doing federal HR, which is everything you can imagine that federal HR would be. Paperwork galore and rules and regulations and everything, but I'm very attention to detail, so it was actually a really good fit for me. And was very comfortable there until almost like one day in my life, it was like God flipped a switch, and all of a sudden everything changed. And so I went from being this 5-star employee that they wanted, like the sky was the limit as to wherever I wanted to go and whatever I wanted to do in the VA. Like I was the fastest learner, like everything could be perfect. And all of a sudden, like nothing was going right. It wasn't that I was doing anything wrong, it's just the table switched. And it was obvious as time went along that the Lord did not want me there, and he was making it known. And so in April of 2019, the Lord called me to leave my $70,000 job and to sit at his feet. And that was all the direction I had. And so by a leap of faith, I left my job. I have a house mortgage, I have bills, I live alone. I have responsibilities, but I also have faith in the Lord. And I trust that if he tells me to do something, that he will provide, right? He is the ultimate provider. And so jumped out of that job and into the life of Jesus, and just for 7 months he took me on a crazy adventure, just really growing in intimacy with him, and taking me on trips too. It was funny, like that following Monday I ran into work or ran into church and met with my friend Kimberly, and she had been kind of the person that was walking alongside me and praying with me as I was leaving the VA. And And so when I got done kind of sharing what had all happened, she's like, I said, so enough about me, what about you? What's going on with you? And she's like, told me a few things, and she's like, oh yeah, and I'm going to Costa Rica in June. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I always wanted to go. Like, I felt like the Lord had highlighted that like a year before. But when he highlighted it to me, like, I knew I couldn't go when I was working that job because I didn't have time. They would never let me off for 10 days in that job. And so I'm like, that sounds awesome. I wish I could go. She's like, well, I think there's still some spots available. You should talk to Devaney. And I'm like, well, I just quit my job and I don't have a plan, so I'm not sure a mission trip is exactly what I need to do. She's like, well, just pray about it. And so the more I prayed about it, the more I felt I needed to talk with Devaney, and the door just opened. The Lord graciously provided me with a huge discount to something I'd be able to afford. The 2 years prior, I was actually in a bad car accident, and I had gotten a settlement in 2018. And so that was some of the money that I was able to live on during this time. So the Lord really actually pre-provided for this leave. And so I went and took my very first mission trip to Costa Rica back in June of 2019, and I was just set on fire for the Lord during that trip. Just so many different things. I have a heart and passion, love to travel. It's been something I've always wanted to do, but never had the time to do. Now I have time and I have no money, right? So it's kind of a flip of the coin. But he's provided for everything. And so that trip was amazing. And after that trip, I went back there over the next several years, probably about 5 or 6 more times to Costa Rica. In 2020, the year of COVID, the Lord miraculously provided for me to go back to Costa Rica for 3 months. And so that was my first 3-month mission trip that I did. And I actually had to renew my passport during COVID, which was a huge struggle. They were over like 1.5 million passports behind when I looked in July, and I had to have everything that was leaving in November. And so slowly but miraculously it made its way to the top. And I got my passport in September. And so yeah, just little things of the way that, little kisses from God along the way that he provided for things. And so I went and did that trip and did a lot of prayer and intercession during that trip, as well as working with the groups down there. They work with men and women that are involved in drugs, gaming, and violence. Women also prostitution and other things. And so I was helping them with their ministries. And encouraging the people that they were working with. And so the people down there are like family to me. I love spending time with them and seeing them. They've been back to visit because we're partners with our church with them as a mission down there. So that's been really wonderful. And so as that kind of subsided, I haven't been back there now in almost 2 years. And so I had just been praying about what the Lord had next for me. And last year, I had been doing some online schools, just trying to grow and learn with the Lord. And last year, as I was praying, Harvest School was highlighted to me. And so Harvest School is a missionary training program, actually. And though in my heart, I don't feel like I'm called to do long-term missions necessarily, but definitely short-term, but the Lord can do as he pleases. But so as I prayed about that, I really felt it was something he was calling me to apply for, that there was going to be some learning and growth that was associated to it. So I did actually get accepted in May and began all the paperwork and process and the schooling stuff and reading books and all those things. And then we were scheduled to leave on September 27th. And so, so I left for Israel was our first stop. We were actually scheduled to go to Israel, South Africa, and Mozambique. Those were the only ones that were actually associated with the school. After the school ended at the beginning of December, you had the opportunity to do an extended outreach where you go and be a missionary in one of their many bases around the world. So they have about 70 some bases around the world, Iris Global does. And they have about 500 missionaries that are actually out there doing work. And so they handpicked maybe 10 or 11 of those and allowed people to apply for them as they felt the Lord was nudging them. And so the one I felt the nudge towards was India. And so I've always had a heart to go to India. Throughout my life, I've just really been drawn to Mother Teresa. Just learning about her life and her passion to help the poor. Just the very simplicity of her life and the way she just showed the love of Jesus to everybody. It didn't matter if you were Muslim or Hindu or Christian. She just felt even if you were one of those, you were just called to be the best that you were. And so if you're going to be a Muslim, be a good Muslim, be a good Christian, be a good Hindu. She didn't care but love. And so that really was her message. And so she marked me with her words and different things. So I always wanted to go to Kolkata to see where she lived and what her life was like there. And so they were only accepting 3 people. And so by God's grace, I was approved. And so that was where I was going to go in December. So we left, flew out of Atlanta. There's a direct flight from Atlanta to Tel Aviv, Israel. It's about 10 and a half hours. And that initially was my longest flight. But the flight home from India became even longer. And so that got very quickly. And so, we went to Israel. And we initially sat into the Sea of Galilee. We stayed on the southeastern side of the Sea of Galilee, right on the sea, and made that kind of our home base for the first week that we were in Israel. And we just started taking the tour up top. We started up at the Golan Heights, which is up by Lebanon and Syria, right on the border. Spent time going through the Golan Heights, spent time going, where else did we go? All over. We also went around, let's see, let me get the right one, Bethlehem, Capernaum. We got to go out onto the Sea of Galilee in one of the boats, which was really special. We went to the Mountain of Beatitudes. And where else did we go there? Felt like there were several places. And there were other places that they would point out. On the northern part of the Sea of Galilee is where the Bible story where Jesus meets the people, the man that was demonized and possessed, and he cast out the demons into the pigs and they went off the cliff. And so we went to the place where they believe was actually the roundabout location where that took place. Obviously, the landscape and everything looks kind of different today. 2,000 years have passed, so it's just their best guesstimate. And that's been a lot of part of Israel. They know some of the things for sure, but otherwise other things are kind of guesstimates. I mean, we only have so much knowledge from the Bible as to what things look like. And so as we were getting kind of done with that area, we also went to oh my gosh, what's it called? The Nazis. There was a Remembrance Center, I forget the name of it. Rod Hashem or something is the Jewish name. But it's where all the Jews are commemorated from what they went through in Nazi Germany. And so it's a whole museum that they have there. They have a special little museum for the children. It was all extremely impacting going and walking through those museums. In the Children's Museum, when you walk in, it's kind of a round, circular museum, and it's very dark. And they have all these mirrors throughout the room, and there is a light that is reflected amongst all the mirrors. And as you walk in and around, when you weave through this room, you'll hear the name of the child, the age of the child when they died, and where they were from. And that is on constant repeat, 24/7. And just the thousands and thousands of children that were killed throughout the Holocaust and the Holocaust Museum. And then going through the other museum is just as impactful. It has all kinds of artifacts and different movies and interviews and different things. And so just seeing that, yeah, we'll just leave it there, just impacts the person. So we also got to go there. As we were getting ready to leave the northern half, we loaded up and we headed towards Jerusalem. We stopped at the Mount of Olives, got to go to the garden, over to St. James Cathedral, and some other sites up top we stopped at. There was a Jewish menorah that we saw. And then as you could see the Temple Mount, but we hadn't gone into Jerusalem. And so then we were moving to our next location. So that was like the 6th. The next day was going to be our Shabbat. So throughout all of Harvest School, we always took one day dedicated to the Lord. It sometimes looked different each week, but it was always one day. And so what I love about that, and that was something that the Lord spoke to me about the importance of doing that when I got home. Just really setting aside a whole day dedicated to the Lord. I just love that practice, and I'm so grateful that the Lord showed me different ways to incorporate that into my life. But so the next day, as we got to our new hotel, it was kind of an outdoor hotel, little cabins along the hillside, because we moved to the southwest side of Jerusalem, up into the mountains a little bit. And so slept in the next morning, just kind of taking my time on Shabbat. Went to breakfast. When I got back to the room, I was just kind of settling in, because we were going to be there another maybe 4 nights. After Shabbat, we were going to go into Jerusalem, see Old Jerusalem, see the wall, and various other spots around there. But as you know, that next morning then, we had sirens going off starting at about 9 a.m. And so 9 a.m. we started hearing what would be described as bombings, and sirens running off when we were running to the bomb shelters. That was the morning that they declared war. And so they had a couple different spots on the grounds of where to go for the bomb shelter. What was closest to me was the laundry room that we went into. And so in there was probably like me and like 5 of my classmates, and then there was about 3 workers from the hotel. And inside, right away, like it was super new for us. I don't think anyone had ever been in a bomb shelter like that before, and so all of a sudden, we immediately start praying and worshiping and pressing in during that time. And I think the workers, obviously that's a culture they're used to. And so initially they thought we were overreacting a little bit, because it is unfortunately a culture that they have to coexist in. And so, but normally, as they explained, it happens one time, and then maybe it won't happen for another year or so. So it's just, one and done, and then peace kind of comes. But that was not the case this time. I think that morning, within the first 3 hours, we probably ran back and forth to the bomb shelter 5 times. And so, in spending up to an hour, but sometimes shorter, we just had to wait till the all clear. And so one of the things that we learned when we were up north in Israel was that Israel has a defense system called the Iron Dome. And so the Iron Dome is this field over Israel that they have different stations throughout the country that when it detects that a missile has been launched as a threat towards them, this Iron Dome automatically responds and sends a missile towards the missile, and they collide in midair. And so when we were hearing the collisions, it was the collisions of the missiles colliding in midair. And some of them were really close, some were a little further off. There was one time we were outside just worshiping and praying kind of on the overlook, and one of the students got a video of a missile coming towards Jerusalem and then making a circle and then leaving. And so is unbelievable. And then just even the stories that we've heard that kind of came, the testimonies of how God moved during that time. Like, it's just, it's beautiful that, you know, you're never alone, right? He is always with you. He's always working. Nothing ever catches God off guard. And so the leadership was trying to decide to what extent the war was going on, to where we should go, because all the women were at this hotel and the men and some of the special guests were at another one, because there wasn't, at that timing, there wasn't the right amount of rooms at the right hotel. So they were figuring all that out. We did a 24-hour burn. We would, in one of the bomb shelters, we all signed up for an hour. And even throughout the middle of the night, we would all get up and then someone would go in there, and we were always worshiping and praying for the full 24 hours. Just really pressed in. I mean, there was one night I remember laying in bed, and I could hear the bombings, and my windows are vibrating as I'm laying in bed. I mean, and all you can do is pray in those moments, right? That God has you held in your palm of his hand, knowing that you'll be okay. And I would say overall, for the most part, I just have the peace of God. That peace that surpasses all understanding. It was just resting, not only on me, but on our group as well. I think we all really believed that we were all called there for that time, a time of intercession, to pray for Israel and its people. And so it was also in that, I was going to share in that bomb shelter initially when we were there with the other workers. One of the workers was from Palestine. She has family in Gaza, but she is in Israel working. And so there's a lot of conflict, right? A lot of internal conflict when you have issues like that. And that's just one small microcosm of what the whole country of Israel really goes through. There's such an intermixture of, you know, people between the two sides, and their families are just torn apart because of the conflict. And so we just really pray for the peace of God to come and heal what's going on there. It's just really devastating and sad to see the war and how it rips families apart. But so eventually we all got into one spot, and the leadership decided that it would be too difficult for us, that we're going to cease our tour, obviously. So I never got to go into Jerusalem. I didn't get to go to Nazareth, or we were going to go down to the Dead Sea, to Masada, all those things. So the trip got put on hold, and they felt that the best thing would be to try and get us out and onto South Africa, which was our next stop. And so Tel Aviv was very much a target. When people look to threaten Israel, they look at Jerusalem, the holy city, and they look at Tel Aviv, the airport. And so there were people stranded at the airport. Everyone was trying to get out, but a lot of the airlines were starting to pull out. And so there was Delta was not running anymore, and a lot of them were pulling out at that time. So to get almost 65 of us out, and to rearrange a lot of our flights was going to be nearly impossible. So they were looking at other alternatives around them. And really the best alternative when you look at the countries that are bordering Israel was Jordan. And Jordan is actually known as kind of a refugee country. They themselves are pretty peaceful, but the countries around them tend to be in a lot of chaos. And so they had heard that some people had made it through one of the Jordan River crossing border successfully the last day or two, and so we were going to try and do that as well. So right before we did that, we had a little time on our hands. We were trying to figure out ways that we could give back. One of the ways that we decided we wanted to try was to give blood. And so there was a big event center in Jerusalem that was giving blood. It was a place like CHI or one of the big arenas. And so we went, and we were there probably close to 10 hours waiting to give blood. We actually got in. We were some of the last people. But it was such a beautiful time to see people just kind of coming together, right, at the worst. with a lot of the casualties of war, they were in desperate need of blood. And so we were so grateful to be able to do that. Of course, while we were waiting in line, the sirens ran off and we all had a race inside. But you know, when it was over and we got it all clear, everybody just went back to their spot, right? Like it was just super peaceful in ways that maybe I haven't experienced elsewhere. There was just this kindness of strangers and things that were going on. So we did end up leaving Israel. And so when you check out, you have to check in and check out of countries, right? And so with Israel, you don't actually get a stamp in your passport. When you check into Israel, you get a little blue card. It has your little passport picture and your information on there. And then when you check out, you get a little pink card. And the reason why they don't stamp your passport is because if your passport is stamped Israel and you try and go to Syria or Lebanon, you'll never make it in those countries because they don't have great relations. And so it is a protection for the Israeli people if they ever want to cross the borders to certain other countries. And so we were checking out, and as we were finalizing our checkout to drive across the border into Jordan, one of the Israeli army people, we had to hold our passports. We all got off the bus, and we were just holding our passports, and she just walked by and checked them. And as she was walking by, like she just started crying as she walked up and down the rows. And they get back, and Will asked her, you know, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And she basically, what she did was she saw her I gave blood stickers, and she could not believe that people from another country would take their time to go into an unsafe kind of location to give blood on their own time. It just broke her of the compassion. And so she just the way the Lord touched her in that was just really beautiful. And the Lord was gracious. I mean, the way he moved the line, that bus line to cross the border was ridiculously long. We were in line for 4 hours without moving one bit. And then all of a sudden, within 30 minutes, we're at the front of the line. Like it moved all of a sudden. It's like the gates opened and the buses moved. It was so many little stories of how just God's hand was in different pieces. And so we crossed over, same thing on the Jordan side. Tons of people there waiting to try and check in, and like buses are dropping off, like loads of people all the time. And so we're sitting, we're watching our luggage and all this stuff, and then our leaders take all of our passports and then they walk in, and they stamped them all, and then we had to walk through that process. They had to get a picture of us as well. But they didn't charge us at all. They were supposed to charge us like a $50 fee to get into the country, a visa fee. And they let us all in for free, every single one of us. And so we grabbed our stuff and crossed the border and got onto our new bus and drove into Jordan. And so we stayed in Jordan about 4 nights, I think. And then we left at varying stages. And so there was like 3 different groups of people that ended up leaving. We had to go down to Amman to get out of the country to their airport, which is about an hour away or so. And so I was the very last group to leave. But yeah, we got to actually go to a few places. So there's 3 tribes of Benjamin, I believe, that were located in today's Jordan. And so one of the places we got to go was the Jabbok River. And that river, we went to the spot, or the area where it's believed that Jacob wrestled with God, where he wrestled with God so long that he dislocated his hip. And so it was just a very cool and special thing to be able to go to that location. We also went to Elijah's hometown area and got to kind of see the area where he would have walked between the mountains over to go to Mount Sinai and like just different things. So just realizing that there's history in other places too, right? Not just to Israel, how the Lord moved back in even the Old Testament. So it's just really special to be able to be in those locations. So then we went to South Africa, and South Africa was amazing. South Africa is actually on the very bottom of Africa. South Africa is the country's name. And because I've had questions, even myself, I have questions. So unless you look at a map often, you don't always know. But yeah, so we stayed in the Nelspruit area. South Africa is known to be a little more Western, I guess. They have their day-to-day life, a lot of cars, a lot of transportation and department stores. They have Western influences with restaurants and different things. One of the girls that was on our trip, she actually was from South Africa, and we stayed at her house because there was in Johannesburg, because there was a 20-hour layover. And so luckily her parents let us in. And so yeah, we stayed in the Nelspruit area, spent time on a campus-ish. That would be more like a youth camp, those summer youth camps or church camps, where you have those outdoor cabins, and then you have like a cafeteria meeting center, and then you had a little like lecture hall or conference area, and so it was all gated in. And so we were there for 3 weeks, spent some time debriefing, kind of taking it slow, had special guests come in and do some preaching and teaching and worship. And so the whole trip, we all had to wash our own clothes. Hand wash was the key. And then, what else? I'm trying to think of anything else that was pertinent. So yeah, we all had a day where we washed our clothes, and then we also had a day where we helped out in the kitchen, doing dishes and cleanup. We all had a color group for the cleanup stuff, and then we had home groups where we were associated with a certain house group of the same people throughout the trip. So we all had different responsibilities as we went along. When we were in South Africa, 2 highlights. For about 4 days we went off. We all had different churches within a 2-hour radius that we were sent out to in groups. And so each church kind of had its own focus. Excuse me. And so I went to Bushwa, and Bushwa is a small village church. I think it's the only Christian church in that area. There are local chiefs in that area that run the village. The chief is kind of like the mayor of the area. Nothing is said, done, or built without the chief's knowledge and approval. And so our pastor, Pastor Norbert, had been trying to get a meeting with the chief for 2 years, and has always been denied. But for some reason, while we were there, he was offered a meeting with the chief. And so we were invited to go with him. And so we actually walked to the chief's residence and office. It's kind of on the same compound. And in his office, it looked more like a courtroom. And so Pastor Norbert shared a message with him and his officials. And throughout the whole message, the chief looked very disinterested and irritated and was checking his watch and his phone and everything like that. And then as Pastor Norbert was concluding, he said that because of wanting to honor the chief, we asked if we could wash his feet and all of his officials' feet and pray for them. And so he said, yeah. So we lined up all the chairs, and we individually went down and washed the chief's feet, his executives, and everybody that was part of his clan. And then we prayed over them, gave them prophetic words and different things to impact them. And we heard some testimonies after that. Some of them were visibly touched during that time, but some people were healed of nightmares. That night, they had had nightmares their entire lives, but that night we're healed of them. Other people had other signs or other things come to fruition. There was healing within people's families. This area specifically, but actually throughout Africa, there's a lot of witchcraft. And so people don't know Jesus. They believe that witches can stir up a spirit or a potion or a whatever, and that's what they lean into. That's how they get their sicknesses healed, is by going to a witch and having them heal them. And so sharing the love of the Lord with them was extra special, knowing that that's not what they lean into. And to know that the Lord touched them individually is just more than words can say, right? To see the Lord moved. Also, while we were there, we were providing a revival each night. All of us got an opportunity to preach or to share a testimony. We also walked throughout the villages. It was extremely hot when we were there, the upper 90s. So we would go just door to door. And when you go to the door, we would just ask if they had time to spend with us. And they would pull out these crates. If they didn't have chairs, they'd find crates or boxes or something for us to sit on. And often we'd find ourselves sitting under mango trees with them. Mango trees are very prevalent throughout Africa. And so the hospitality is probably one of the most touching things for me. How they went out of their way with what little they had to make sure that we were comfortable, that we were in the shade, that we had water or food or whatever. It just was extremely generous, because I often thought about back home how if I even walk across the street to knock on my neighbor's door, they won't answer the door, right? People have video doorbells. People don't want to be bothered or interrupted in their day-to-day. But these people were more than willing to welcome you in and to listen to whatever you had to say and to pray with them and all those things. Like, I think it's so beautiful to see how the Lord moves in that, right? When you have a willing heart and spirit, people willing to give the time to other humans. And so we did a lot of those things. We slept on the basement floor on air mattresses that we brought from home, and ate whatever they gave us. We were explained that it is very dishonoring to not eat the things that they give you and to not eat everything that's on your plate, because a lot of these people have no money, and they will give you everything they have just to be generous. You know, they will give you their absolute last cup of water, or they will butcher this chicken that they only have one, and they probably won't ever get another one for many months, right? And so they go out of their way to be generous. And so if we snub them by saying, I don't eat that, or I can't eat that, or I don't want that, or that's too much, that's very hurtful to them. So we were instructed very early on that we just need to be gracious to the people that are giving to us, because they're giving everything they have. And so, yeah, we ate a lot of rice. And in Africa, South Africa as well as Mozambique, and probably throughout the continent, they have what's called shima. And shima is, the best way I can describe it is when it's cooking, it kind of looks like cream of wheat. And it will thicken up and get into kind of like a thicker paste. And then when it's done, it's white. And then when it's done, it's almost as if they took cooked rice and blended it up. And so it's very sticky consistency. And so, yeah, so you just scoop some on your plate. But I mean, it's very cheap there. And so that and rice is probably even cheaper than rice. There's probably very little nutritional content in that as well. But you find, I mean, when we went to Bourgeois, they overflowed our plates. And even the kids' plates were so full. But what you learn is that a lot of that is empty calories. So there's very little fiber, so it doesn't fill you up. So you have to eat huge portions to actually feel full. And so the more you stretch your stomach, the more you end up eating, because you never get that sense of really being satiated or full. Because they're not eating a lot of fats either. And so they had vegetables. We did a lot of cabbage there, and different things. But yeah, so it's a lot of carbohydrates because that's what's cheap, and some vegetables within that. And then before we left South Africa, we actually got to go on safari, which was super amazing. So yeah, we went up to Kruger National Park and got a whole day to go out on safari and got to spend time and see the giraffes and the elephants and lions and rhinos and all the things. It was just it was a very cold safari day, but because we actually were in South Africa during their winter season, it was coming out of their winter season, but we did get to do that before we left. And then we went to Mozambique, and when we got to Mozambique, Iris has multiple bases. That was the initial country that the founders settled in, actually up in Pemba. But because the war was going on up in Pemba, we weren't allowed to go up that far into the country. So there were several other bases that we could choose from. And so the first base I went to was in Dundo, which is close to the Beira airport. And in Dundo, we got to go out into the villages. We would go to the hospitals, the children's and the adult hospital, which is extremely dirty and really sad to be in. They basically have a bed, and I don't know if they have much medicine, quite frankly. The families are the ones that take care of them, not so much the nurses. So if you don't have family, you're probably not going to get great care at the hospital. So supplies and everything are just very limited, we'll say. Even the conditions, it was relatively clean, the one that we went into, the room itself, but yeah, just really sad. Kind of breaks your heart. Malaria is pretty common there. You get that by a mosquito bite. It's nothing that they are over. I mean, most people get flu-like symptoms when they get malaria, and if you get a pill, it'll just go away. It'll maybe 7 days of the flu. There are occasions where it can turn into bigger things and you can actually die from it. But for the most part, it's something that's common throughout Africa. We had medicine we took to help warrant some of that off. But yeah, so we got to go out and preach and share Jesus with people and pray for people. We saw a lot of different healings. We saw people's eyes open. We saw people's feet be healed from bone spurs. Yeah, just depression and anxiety leave. A lot of people having nightmares that left. So many amazing things to be able to see the way that the Lord just moved in and through people. And so, yeah, we also got to go to some bush churches way out there where the only way you can get there is by vehicle. And these people, they live off the land. They're so far removed from culture, it would take a vehicle for them to get into town to sell anything or those kinds of things. In one little hut church, it was dirt floor with sticks over it, like the sticks were their roof. I don't even think they had money for a tin roof. The whole church welcomed us as we drove up. They sang us in, and just the power of God just hit this little church. This church never thought they would ever see a missionary in their whole life, and felt so extremely blessed that we came to their church. And it just, the love that just came out of these people, and to watch the offerings is the most touching and humbling thing, to see them walk up with their little coins to give all little that they have. It's just precious to see how the Lord moves through them. And so, so spent a lot of time riding in the back of a flatbed truck down horribly bumpy and crazy roads that if it ever rained, you would never pass on them. It just would be impossible. So that was Dondo. Then we went up north to Nacala, which was right on the Indian Ocean. It was actually settled on the inlet of the Indian Ocean. Beautiful up there. We got to spend about 2 weeks in Nacala. It was very hot in Nacala. Your 90 will feel like 110. You just feel like you're extremely close to the sun at 8 a.m. in the morning. Like it just beats down on you. We got to go, we were split, so we were a group of like 15 that were split into a group of 3, and we each were assigned a church. The church I was assigned to was also the group project church, so one of the days we all went and we were helping to build that church. They already had it functioning, but they were actually had raised some money to use some concrete for the church. So we were working on creating the pillars and moving dirt and all kinds of things. And so, but we got to go out with that church, me and there was 3 guys in my group, and we went to some areas where they hadn't been yet. And most of the population there is Muslim, actually. And so we went into a lot of these villages and just shared Jesus and asked to pray for people. And we had translators that would go with us. And in Necala, we weren't able to drink any of the water. And so we always had to buy bottled water. And the Lord would just provide food at various times, just so gracious. And we would go and sit. There was one little, on that trip, or that little visit, we ended up being in just this little concrete room, probably about that big, with this little mama, and she had to have been close to 90, and she could not see, whether it was cataracts or something, but she could barely see at all. And me and the 3 guys, we just sat down on the concrete with her. It was super hot in there, and we just held her hands and just blessed her and prayed with her. And by the end, she was just crying. And we asked her what was wrong. She's like, I can see. She's like, I haven't been able to see, and I can see now. She's like, I can see your face. And it just was so touching to see how the Lord cared so much about this little 90-year-old mama just sitting in front of us, and just how the presence of the Lord just filled that room. So more people came in, and we ended up praying for many more people before we left. And so, yeah, all of Necala, the really interesting thing I thought there was that almost the whole city was covered in sand. It was very intriguing to me. There was a couple main roads that were concrete, but you go off roads, everything's on like this beach. The whole city is. And so every time you go out to minister, you're covered in dirt by the time you get home. And we did have running water at this place. I guess that was one of the things I could talk about. Running water, what a novelty and specialty thing that is, right? Especially hot water. And so in South Africa, we got both. We got limited hot water, but had showers and we had toilets. In Dondo, we had bucket showers. And so basically there was a big old vat that would have water in it. And you take a bucket along with a small little bucket, or kind of bucket with a handle. And you take that into one of the showers, and that's how you do your shower. So you put a little water on, and then you lather up, and then you throw a little more on, and you wash off. And so we took bucket showers when we were there for 2 weeks, which can be very refreshing. Sometimes it can be fun, depending on the time of day. And then the toilet situation in Dondo were holes in the ground. And so you go into each desert, there was 3 of them. And when you walk in around the corner, it's all blocks of cement. There is a light, but there's also a lot of roaches at night. They kind of all come out as well towards the light. So that can be fun. But there is basically a little hole, a cement hole, that you just stand over. And that's how you use the bathroom. And so you bring your own toilet paper and wash your hands when you're done. And so when I was in Gouchois, they had a building with a cement hole with the actual toilet seat cemented into it. And so, yeah.
Do you take the toilet paper with you, or did you put it in the hole?
Oh, everything can just go in the hole.
It goes in the hole.
Everything goes in the hole.
Okay.
Yeah, because that hole, I don't know what happens when it gets filled. I know it's going to be there. So, but yeah, so varying levels of things. Let's see, that was up in Necala. And so Then the Nicala, so it's a new base, so the new base has a shower and has a toilet. But the thing about Nicala is the electricity goes out frequently. So when the electricity goes out, there's no water. And so we would sometimes grab water from the ocean to manually flush the toilets with water, to force flush them. But then you can't take showers either. And we got moved around a little bit, and so when we got moved up by the prayer and worship room, the water when the electricity goes out won't pump up. And so I ended up taking a bucket shower there even, because it just happens. But, so for the most part, that was it. But there was 1 or 2 times where when we went out into the bush, sometimes we literally just had a hole in the dirt to go to. And sometimes there were no doors. You had very little privacy when you're out that far. And so I brought toilet paper from home, and then you sometimes can also sneak some along with you. So it's always just one of those missionary things. You always learn to carry certain things, and toilet paper is one of them. And so that was that situation. So yeah, the call was just very touching. We just had a lot of great experiences going out, sharing the love of Jesus. And then we went to Zampeto for graduation. And then after graduation, I went to India. And so I spent about 18 days in India. In India, it really kind of overwhelms you. There's a lot to take in. Kolkata is actually known as the armpit of India. And it is exactly what all of that means in your head. And so from the smells, from the looks, from the everything in the environment. It is when people ask you why you went to Kolkata, because it is not the area that people go to when they go to India. And so yeah, I think they're always concerned about how long it takes a person to adjust. I think overall we adjusted pretty well. The environment, when you look at your phones every day on the weather app, if you scroll down, it can tell you the ranking of the air quality. And so here, typical ranking, we're always in the green. It's like 63, something like that. If you look in Kolkata, the typical ranking is the extremely poor, 380. And so Kolkata is worse than some of the other ones, but I noticed it when we first flew into Delhi, that when I looked outside, it just looked foggy. And I just assumed it was foggy there. But then when we got to Kolkata, same thing, only actually thicker. And so the air quality is so bad there that people are coughing all the time and hacking things up and then spitting everywhere too. It's just the pollution and the years of not taking care of the transportation in the area has just accumulated. So the air quality is extremely poor. The driving is probably the most insane I've ever experienced, being in all these various countries. I don't know how there aren't more accidents. There are some lanes, but nobody abides by lanes. People just cut people off, honk, and all the things. Like they go varying speeds. There is some rules, like rules to the madness, but I haven't completely figured it out. It's a little beyond me, and I would drive in Costa Rica, which I thought was a little crazy, but I don't know if I'd ever drive in Kolkata. Extremely dangerous. People don't care about life in that capacity. And so we took Ubers everywhere we went, and sometimes there was one that was extremely harrowing, we'll say. And we saw an accident when we were there too. Just a vehicle slammed into another one. And so, yeah, so the transportation is crazy. We got to ride some rickshaws. They have various types of rickshaws. They're kind of like these little buggies. They have, for the most part, done away with the manual ones where the actual man is carrying this carriage and then carries you and back. So they've done away with all the manual ones. They do ride bicycles, though, as their way of earning money. And then there's some auto ones, and we took some of the auto ones. People also get around on scooters or motorcycles, and several have cars as well. The city looks extremely dated. It looks more like the 1940s and 60s throughout the majority of the city. Kolkata is known for their sex trafficking and their brothels. There are 20 red light districts throughout, and that actually was our mission and why we were there. And so we went and spent time, this one missionary works in 2 different brothel areas of Kolkata and has gotten to know some of the women in this area. And so we spent time in the brothels, spending time with the women and the children, and we did a lot of Christmas parties because we were there in December, and just got to share different things with people and pray for people, and yeah, it was so beautiful. I mean, these are really like communities within communities within communities, and just India, it's just such a poor country. There's a lot of trash everywhere. There's some rivers that go in between, and there is a lot of stench because there's not much flow with that. And people have just thrown garbage in them over the years. They also, religion-wise, it is about 80% Hindu religion up there. Although they speak Bengali in northern India and they speak Hindi in southern India. But yeah, 80% is Hindu. There's about maybe 15% Muslim, and in all of India, there's about 2% Christian. In Kolkata, there's 0.08% Christian. And there is parts, like in northern India, northwest India, where people are actually persecuted for their faith, where there have been missionaries up there that have been killed because of the work that they've done. And so India is a very challenging and difficult country to be a missionary in. They're not necessarily well received. However, in Kolkata, because of Mother Teresa's ministry, I think there's a little more acceptance. We also got to do some prayer walking. So Kolkata has one of the most dangerous and notorious brothels in all of the world. And we actually went and did a prayer walk through that. And it's just, it will wreck you for your whole life just to see how people live, how these little kids live in those brothels, and the women, and just what they wear, and how you can just observe while you're walking how people are treated in these little like villages almost, these communities within the communities. And we were spit on as we walked through because we stood out very much so. I mean, there was 4 of us, Americans, and then our leader is actually from Russia. She's been a missionary there for 8 years. And so you're not welcome in those communities because they just keep to themselves. India itself does not like pictures, so you'll rarely be able to take photos. I have some, but when we did like a tourist day, we went down to the flower market. So at the flower market, they sell mostly the gold and orange marigolds because they offer those to the Hindu gods. And so you can't walk from here to those doors without running into a Hindu god structure or shrine. And so it literally is everywhere. And so there are numerous times where you almost feel like you're in the Old Testament, right? Just seeing how people worship their gods in varying ways. And it's so overt and in your face that you can't miss it. Which just also, at the same token, draws you so close to the Lord, right? Because you need His strength, you need His encouragement to be able to make it through those days. Because we are, our fight isn't against flesh and blood, right? It's against the powers and the principalities of darkness. And you learn very quickly on trips like this that it is a spiritual war out there. It is not all about just doing the acts of service, but it's also about fighting against the spiritual war. And you can feel the heaviness as you walk through a lot of these brothels and different areas, but you can also see the light, right? And so in the work that Lana's doing down there is just amazing, the way that she's connected with these women. And it comes at a cost. these sweet sisters that were one of the first people I met when I was down there. And we were walking through and praying with people that were associated with her ministry, and got to know the sisters. And the one sister, like, it was costly for her to say yes to Jesus. Like, her husband is not a believer. They believe in the Hindu gods, and though he is allowing her to go to church and to do those things, he and his family do not support her. Like, she and her family has left her as well. Like, there's just all this separation, right? And so we pray for them, and we hope that the Lord will intervene. But for them to say yes, they're not always welcomed back into their families. You know, I think a lot of times we give our Christian faith as almost like a checkbox Christianity, right? I went to church on Sunday, check. I went to youth group on Wednesday night, check. You know, I said my prayers, I did this many, prayers or acts of service or whatever. And we forget that there are places out in this world where it's costly to be a Christian. It's costly to say yes to Jesus. And so I think that's one of the most impactful things that I've really learned, especially in India, is what a person's yes really means and how to honor that. And there's movement there. There's movement in the Broncos. There's people coming and growing and learning about the Lord, and seeing that He has a better way for them. Seeing that we follow God that actually does move, right? That does more than just sit there. And so it's just beautiful to be able to do a lot of these Christmas programs and children's ministries, and just have God just even work in me throughout the last 3 months. Just by the time I left, I just was overflowed with joy in the way the Lord had moved, and was just so grateful to have had that experience. So then I left on the 17th of December, it was the 21st of December I left Kolkata and flew home, and so it was a 16-hour flight. It's a long time. But and I got home and spent time with my family. I've had time to kind of debrief a little with the Lord, and just pray about what's next. So that's kind of what it was. Any questions? Any things I missed? Anything you want to know?
I have a question about money. Like, how did you come up with money to do all this stuff, or did you have to pay for it, or I don't know, just kind of how the funding works to do all this stuff,
Yeah. No, I struggle. I don't like to ask people for money. It's just the way I grew up, and if the Lord wants to put it on someone's heart.
So does each person is in charge of fundraising their own?
Or somehow paying for it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the school in of itself, airfare was about $5,000. I flew 16 flights, I think, if I recall correctly. So about $5,000 for airfare, and then I think tuition was $4,800. So it was about $10,000 ordeal just for the school and the extended outreach. I think that was about right.
And are they looking for people to become full-time missionaries? Is that kind of what it is?
Ultimately is what, the school would like. Because in order for anyone to be a full-time missionary with Iris, they have to go through the school. Mm-hmm. And so, ultimately that's the plan, is to kind of grow.
Get you kind of understanding what the missionary work would be like, and that you...
The majority of the people there was 28 people under the age of 30. So it is a very young kids in school. We had 2 18-year-olds and 2 19-year-olds.
How many people do you think turn into full-time missionaries?
It is going up, Iris, at least for Iris. They have about 20% of people that go into full-time missions after Harvest School, which isn't what it used to be. And so there is a fire that is burning and stoking for that.
Do you see other missionaries in the field when you're over there?
Yeah, because each of the base had their own missionaries, and we went out with them and got to talk with them about their journeys, how they got there, and how God's provided or moved in their life, and what they're burning for. And so each base kind of has their own thing that they really focus on mission-wise. So they're not all the same. Some, like the Zimpeto base and the Machapa base, they're all kids. Like they work, like one of them actually houses, both of them I think actually house kids, and they have their own schools. And so if you love kids, like that's the place to go. I prefer adults, and so I went to more adult friendly kind of ones. So yeah, each base has their own. Absolutely.
So you're going for 3 months.
2 months for the school, and then an additional-ish, yeah, like 10 weeks for the school, and then an additional 2 weeks if you wanted to extended outreach, but that's
Yeah.
only if people are
But
called.
what you've seen could have been 7 years worth of stuff.
It was very compacted.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
There
about
was
it.
which is why we also needed our Shabbat, right? That Sabbath day of rest was so imperative. We will often long for that because they work early mornings and late nights. We also did, we had exercise every morning that we had to go be a part of, and like they just kept everything moving. And so, because you also have to be physically fit in order to do missions work, you know, it's not, it's something that you have to be.
Did you ever have too much food
Too
on your
much?
plate?
Oh yeah, frequently.
How did you eat it all when you were supposed to do that?
The very first time in Gushwa, literally we got there at 2:30 and we had lunch before we left. And so by the time we got there, then they fed us, and this plate was overflowing with all of this. It was rice at least. And yeah, it took me 45 minutes to eat it, and I wanted to throw up.
Mm.
It was really, really bad. Yeah.
So out of the school that you go to, what is the percentage, or is there a percentage of people that just go, no, forget it, you know, and leave?
During the school?
Yeah. None?
None, typically. Yeah, we did actually have one girl that was with us, which they said this had never happened, but she was so, something happened with her heart because of the war in Israel, that when we crossed over to Jordan, she ended up, right before my group left, I was the last group to leave, she got in an Uber and went back to Israel. And so, and she got off all our group chats and didn't want to be contacted. Eventually, the CEO was able to get in touch with her. She requested no further contact, but she said she felt God calling her back and she had to go. And she didn't want to be talked out of it. So she took an Uber back across the border. But otherwise, no, they've never had anyone otherwise leave. No, it's stressful at times because you're also living with people, right? I have lived in a college situation in 25 years. I've lived alone. And so to be surrounded by people all the time, a little bit more of an introvert, it's definitely a prime time for the Lord to come in and shave off some edges, so to speak. Yeah, refinement is always fun, right? Yeah. Anything? Yeah.
How do you pack for something like this?
Great question. It was very stressful. I think because I'm a little type A, I think I had some strengths in my favor. I had some downtime at my job. And so I spent a lot of time just searching online, first of all, because all we were allowed to take is one suitcase and a carry-on suitcase. So you got like 1.5 basically. And then I had my backpack. And so, and the weight requirements too. I think we had 6 different airlines, and so every airline's different, and it had different requirements, and it's hard to find out online. And then sometimes they put it online and they don't even follow it, right? And so it's like, well, worst case scenario is this. And so, yeah, because they also required you to bring a sleeping bag, an air mattress, and a tent as well. And so that already there takes a lot of my weight requirements. So I also knew I was going to be hand washing everything. So I had to really strategize as to what I was taking and how and why. And so I took these pants actually. These are cool KUHL pants. They're like hiking pants, but they are like quickly drying pants. And so I try to be cognizant of the clothes, like I didn't take cotton t-shirts because they would take a long time to dry on the line, which really worked in my favor because in South Africa, on my washing day, it rained frequently. And so I had very little time to get my clothes dry. I did bring a little stretchy clothesline, so in my bunkhouse I could hang some clothes. But yeah, so that's hard because when you're looking at 5 different countries, and then we also had different clothing requirements of what we could wear. And so in Israel, I could wear some shorts sometimes, but when we went to holy sites, I had to cover my knees and I had to cover my shoulders. And so some holy sites I had to wear a dress, or a skirt. It just depended on the specific location. But it was most flexible in Israel. South Africa, on base, we could wear kind of whatever we wanted. So that was nice. But when we went off base to Gouchois, every day we had to wear skirts when we go out to do ministry. And always had to cover our shoulders. In Mozambique, I think, Dondo was the same, Nacala, yeah, that was the same too. And when you swam in the ocean, you still had to cover your knees and your shoulders. And so a lot of girls ended up wearing like capri tights, but you had to have a long shirt over it because they had to cover your bottom as well. In India, now India was the most strict. We had to cover all the way down to our ankles. I couldn't wear these pants because they're not baggy enough. I do have another pair of pants that are really flowy that I wore occasionally. But we actually went to the market and just bought clothes. Like I bought a whole new wardrobe for $20 because things are so cheap. The dollar goes way farther in India than it does in any other country. The conversion rate in most of the other countries are relatively similar. Israel's similar. South Africa. Mozambique's a little less, or a little better in our favor. But India is just super cheap there. We went out, we took Lana and her 5 staff to a nice restaurant, and we ordered a whole lot of meals for all of us to share, and there was 4 of us, so 5, in fact 10, so there was 10 of us, plus a couple kids. The whole meal cost us $40. And that was a really nice restaurant.
Question, could you use the dollar or did you have to go to their country's currency?
Yes. Yes, we had to go to the country for the most part. Israel, they would take your US dollars, but they would give you theirs back, the shekels back. But we didn't have much opportunity to buy stuff there, unfortunately. We were kept being told that we would buy most of our stuff in Jerusalem, which we never got to. And at the end, they would give you 5 minutes to run to the bathroom, or you had 5 minutes in the gift shop. That was it. And so it would be like a mad dash. You just grab things, swipe the card, and run out the door because the bus was going to leave. We had a very tight schedule to get to all the places. So I came back with very little from there. One of the things I did bring back, actually, a free souvenir. We went to Shiloh, and I got to pick up a piece of pottery that was on the ground, which is just really special. If you remember, that's just the place where the tabernacle of the Lord was set for many years. And so I got to bring that back from when all the pottery was destroyed there. But yeah, so then South Africa, I had very little change, but yeah, we had to have their money there. Mozambique, they changed money and we got SIM cards in Mozambique because the telephone and all that other stuff was a challenge sometimes to stay connected back home. I've used a nomad service online, which worked fine in Israel and Jordan, but didn't work well at all in Mozambique. So the SIM card was really helpful. Yeah, in India we had to change money too because they're so poor, they only have their money. But yeah, packing wise, otherwise I just shoved the essentials in there. I think when you think packing, you want to always make sure you have enough underwear. And so I planned plenty of that. And then everything else you can kind of reuse, right? A couple days or whatever.
Toilet paper?
Just
kidding. Toilet paper.
I did pack some, just like travel camping toilet paper, because that would just slide, because I didn't want to deal with the roll and all that was very bulky, and I only had so much space. But clothespins, I had a wash bag that I took, which was super helpful because nobody else brought one. They used just like big plastic bowls to throw soap in, and then they had to scrub them themselves somehow. But so this wash bag had these little nubbies inside, and it was like a washboard, which really helped get my clothes clean. That was probably the best purchase I've ever made. Yeah, I mean, short of getting the essentials in there, and eventually you think that you'll just buy the rest later. I did take bar soap versus liquid, because liquid weighs too much. And then all the clothes I took were just quick dry clothes for the most part. And you try and have a color palette that matches everything, so that you don't have just one shirt that you can only wear with this one thing. And I took probably 4 skirts, I think, because I knew I was going to end up wearing skirts a lot. I took tennis shoes but didn't wear them much. I wore mostly either my flip-flops or my Teva sandals that I was strapped into. Yeah, I took a little soap. Contact stuff, I wear contacts, so you can't buy that internationally, so you always need to make sure you have enough, or it's just very hard, or if you do find it, it's going to be extremely expensive. And so there's a couple essentials that we knew of. They did give us a list, but I mean, multiple countries, it is a little challenging. And you just never know when you're going to get to a store, if you'll get to a store. And so to be able to buy things when you ran out, you just don't know going in. Now, if I went again, I would have a better understanding of, I can buy this there, I can buy that there, and I think you'll find a way, but yeah. And then I did buy a water bottle that, it's a Grail, and it's actually a water purifier. So when I was in South Africa, there was times where I could drink the water and other people couldn't, because it actually purified. It's more than just like a Brita pitcher, which filters, but this actually purifies and brings out any bacteria and harmful things that would often cause upset stomach. And so that was super helpful to be able to purify, to make sure I was getting clean water, even if it was tap and supposedly okay. And so that was nice. Yeah, so it was challenging, but made it work. And when it came down to it, you can only stress so much when it comes to luggage, and so I just assumed that I would just pay overage fees or whatever. And so I didn't have to do that too much. But there was one airline that we flew where it was like 23 kilograms, and you could go over if you had to pull it out of that. And then I had to carry that onto the airplane. And so packing cubes really are smart. I highly recommend packing cubes. They really compress your stuff, and luckily I was just able to pull out 2 packing cubes and carry them with me. And so it made it so much easier than having to hold all these t-shirts or whatever. So yeah, so there's a lot of little tricks of the trade you kind of learn as you go about. So, anything else?
So you spoke of the healings. I've talked to many missionaries that have witnessed that. And in our country, we don't, it's like most things, we read about in a book, but then that's as far as it goes. And we go to our doctors and say, heal me, but in their countries, there is no doctors. So it's kind of like you say, the woman all of a sudden she could see. Mm-hmm. And it's, yeah.
Well, a lot of times, I guess I feel like sometimes it is because we have too many things accessible to us. Well, if God can do it if he wants, otherwise I'll just go to the doctor, right? But there they don't have that. And even the doctors they have, A, they couldn't afford them, but B, they probably don't have the stuff to help them anyway. And so, and when you're out in the bush, all they have is a prayer and what little faith. And so I find that's why people see more healings internationally than we do here in West. Because we actually can control things a little more on our own. We don't need God like other people do.
We don't think we do.
Yes. Thank you. You're correct.
I'm going to share your cloth that you brought.
The what? Oh. This is a capulana. So clothing-wise, or anything else-wise, capulanas are what they use throughout most of Africa. And basically a capulana is just a piece of fabric. And so this piece of fabric can be used as a tablecloth. It can be used to tie your baby onto your back. And so a lot of them will tie the kid in there and then tie this up. Most often it's also used as a skirt. And so we actually got some capulanas made into skirts when we were in Dondo. So that was really fun. They can be made into bags and all kinds of other things. The fabric is really stiff when you first get it, but the more that you wear it or whatever, the more it loosens up. They're pretty cheap. Anywhere from $1.50 to $3 is how much a capulana will cost. And then they also use these as a way of honoring people. So I actually got to go to a well dedication as well when I was in Nakala. And the people that were involved in the well dedication, you honor them by wrapping a capulana around their shoulders. And so everyone got a new capulana, and that's a way to honor. We honor the chief with that as well. So capulanas are multi-purposes. They're in all kinds of bright fabrics and different colors, and so this was the one that I was honored with at graduation. So capulanas are pretty fun. Yeah. Anything else? We'll close this in prayer.
Are we good? What's that look like? I'm gonna hold her hand, I'm gonna ask you to pray for us.
Yeah.
That's our necklace. Oh, dear Lord, I'm just amazed at your work, at your choosing, how you pick people out of your world to say, go and do this for me. Lord, as I say, her 7 years of experience in her few months will never leave her, and she's passing it on now like you need her to do. So Lord, help us to learn from her experience. Help us to see how blessed we are, but that we need to take that blessing out to them. Lord, I just ask you to continue to watch over her and just continue to give you your plan, because she's definitely yours and she knows who you are, just like you know who she is. Lord, thank you for bringing her here. Thank you for just what you do. I'm going to ask you to close for us.
Oh, precious Jesus, Lord, I just thank you, Lord. I thank you for this church, Lord. Thank you for this house, and the way that they honor you, Lord. Thank you for the people, Lord, that serve here. People that call you Father, Lord. Lord, I just pray that the Holy Spirit will come and water their hearts tonight, Lord. Both things that she'll just water their hearts, Lord, whether it's towards missions, Lord, and realizing that really a missionary is just a sent one, Lord, and that we're all called to be sent ones. Whether it's here in this church, out in the community, or across the world, Lord, just prick their hearts, Lord, for where you want them to be, what you're calling them to do, how they can show the love of Jesus to the people around them, Lord. Lord, we thank you for the way that you moved tonight, Lord. We thank you for the way that you're going to move in the future, Lord. We just ask your blessing to come and rest here, and that people will be drawn to your heart, drawn to the intimacy with you. We pray all these things in the mighty and powerful name of Jesus.
That was just wonderful. Oh, such a wonderful.